Hi everybody, I'm Josef Urban and I will say something. Actually, it's this paper that I put on archive in January. And I should warn you that a lot of this work has been done by ChatGPT, including the slides, but I went over the slides, so there shouldn't be some major misinformation there. And another thing that the AI has produced is a podcast, like a 15-minute podcast, which I put on YouTube. So there is some misinformation there, but it's much better in propaganda than I am. So if you want to hype it up, then listen to the podcast. So this is the executive summary. So I took a relatively well-known book on topology, which has a major part on general topology, and tried to auto-formalize it. And I took ChatGPT 5.2 mostly, and the kind of coding agent that these companies and also some open source people are these days developing, which are mostly developed to do autonomously coding for you, like some software development. And I kind of very simply hooked it up to a proof checker and told it just like, here is the textbook, here is the LaTeX, which is like, I think like 250 pages of general topology. Please try to auto-formalize it so that it proof checks. And the result was quite interesting. So the first weekend when it started to happen, I almost didn't sleep because I was really pretty hypnotized by how it was working, and I also needed to interact with it. But ultimately, like by the time I put the paper on the archive, it produced 150,000 lines of relatively like proof-checked formalized topology with some major theorems in it, of which 130,000 were produced basically in 2 weeks when I decided to pay the kind of heaviest usage subscription to OpenAI. I have just today looked at how it progressed. So that's this BCK 5016 backup, and I guess the outcome of that, which I will mention later, is that what the process kind of didn't stop. It kind of continues growing quite quickly. And I should say, like, one of the surprising thing, like in the podcast AI generated, they call me a garage hacker. The kind of funny aspect of it is that basically everybody can do it today. Like there's really nothing extraordinary that I have done. So that's kind of an interesting message that maybe we will really get auto-formalization done in 2026 without some serious effort or science. So this slide is a bit about like this topology that I decided to formalize, and I don't know what exactly was the reason. Like we were also with Chad Brown, we were setting the experiment up, and I was telling him that we could do Angle King, and he said, no, I studied Monkress. So we took Monkress. Maybe one reason why we took topology was that Chad has his pet proof assistant called Megalodon, which is the successor of his Egal proof assistant, which is his like a higher order set theory with Curry-Howard proof terms. I guess it to some extent resembles Coq, but it's, I would say, much more bare bones, much more low level, much more declarative, and also, yeah, more limited, I would say, in various ways. So Chad has used his proof assistant to formalize a lot of set theory. In particular, he developed the serial numbers, the convey numbers. So topology was like a reasonable thing to try when you already have like enough set theory. We should say that the target of this is not some theorem proving or automated theorem proving. The target is more like here is the book, read the LaTeX proof and try to express what's written in natural language in the formal language of this proof checker. So in principle, we shouldn't be doing too much fancy automated theorem proving, but obviously these things sometimes interfere in various ways. Okay, so this is the high level loop. As I already said, like we have the LLM and the kind of coding agent, which is like a wrapper around the LLM, and we let the coding agent talk to this kind of compiler or proof checker, which behaves as a compiler, in this case Megalodon. And the good thing about Megalodon, even though it's kind of so bare bones, it has a reasonable error messaging. So you can run it relatively quickly, it runs quite fast, and it reports quite reasonably, like there is an error on line 1056, and the error seems to be that. And it seems to be good enough for these today's like general LLMs to iterate. So the LLM gets it wrong very often, like very much, but it seems to have the capability to kind of look at the error message, look at the line when it did something wrong, and try to fix the error. Like sometimes this really takes a while. Like I should say, the Megalodon is like a virtually unknown proof assistant, which doesn't have a high presence on GitHub or internet. So it's quite clear that the LLMs aren't much trained on the Megalodon code. But still, like surprisingly, like the language that Megalodon is using isn't something super fancy, something super unfamiliar. So the LLM learns the syntax relatively reasonably, and it also kind of learns how to do the proofs, even though it's kind of doing mistakes all the time. But like this quick error messaging is a very good way how to always remind it, don't do this, do that. And it seems to be working. Like it could probably work better if you trained more on this particular proof style, but it already works well enough. So when I saw and Chad kind of confirmed that it's doing reasonable stuff, like the I don't know, definition of topology that created and the first theorems that it created looked okay to me and to Chad, then I basically let it run. So at that point, it has this relatively big file with the topology development. And obviously, I told it something like, okay, you need to formalize this all. So you should try to formalize the statements, the definitions, and then gradually do the proofs. You don't have to finish the proofs immediately. You should kind of do things gradually in various ways, but occasionally try to finish some stuff. So it kind of did its own thinking how to basically schedule this work, which is also quite interesting. I guess I have already explained all of this. So an important part in like this Megalodon prover is that it's also relatively declarative, like the proofs. So you can most of the time see very clearly what you are proving. Like the proof style allows the LLM to see, now I'm in this part of the proof, I can use these assumptions or previously proved lemmas, and now I need to prove this next small lemma, and everything is kind of very clear. So I think that's very useful for the LLM. And you can, as I said, you can do things gradually using this admit keyword, which I think comes from Coq. So I think I kind of explicitly instructed it to proceed in this way, to kind of start with these like Mizar style proof sketches, and then gradually make them more and more deep and developed until basically there is no admit anywhere in the proof. And this slide also says that I kind of did a bit of sandboxing. So these coding agents are in theory pretty dangerous objects. Like if you gave them like a full power over your computer, they could probably do things that you do not want them to do. So I just use this bubble wrap, which seems to be like a reasonable tool how to isolate some working environment inside my Linux notebook or my Linux server. And gradually I've moved the work to a server where I'm running the auto-formalization session in something like a GNU screen in this Tmux, the terminal multiplexer, and I'm kind of backing it up and pushing it to GitHub. Why Megalodon? So I should say by now we have tried it with at least 3 other systems, with Holite, with Agda, with Naprosh, and Zargarzel has been doing a lot of experiments with Lean. So I don't know how much Megalodon actually matters. The thing here is that like I'm using like this compilation fast checking mode, which is just kind of good for my laziness. So I can imagine, and I think John Harrison and June Lean are now working on that. You can set up something which works in the kind of interactive mode, like when you are, for example, in the OCaml read eval print loop, and you are continuously issuing the commands, and OCaml is responding to you. But I was kind of too cautious and too lazy. I was thinking, what if the coding agent invokes some exception, and the whole thing will have to be watched much more than I'm watching it. So I preferred like this kind of Mizar style compilation style, but I think it's not really a big deal to set things up also in this kind of interactive mode, which, for example, Holite is using. One thing I'm doing, which I may be able to show you, is that I am basically HTMLizing the whole development kind of as soon as I push it on GitHub, which allows me to click through these proofs and see what went wrong or how the proofs were done. So I don't know, the ChatGPT called this the one prompt trick. So at some point I paid for this big ChatGPT Pro subscription, and I needed to automate things because suddenly I had a lot of credits for using the LLM, and it wasn't, before that it was waiting all the time for the kind of credits to reset. But like when I paid the $200 per month subscription, it was running kind of continuously. So I did this hack, which is I'm running it in this terminal multiplexer, in this Tmax, and whenever the coding agent kind of comes back to me and says, I have finished the work, give me some more work, I detect it from the outside, and I automatically inject this prompt, which says, read the file Claude MD, treat it as authoritative work instruction, and work as long as possible. And so this is, I don't know, like 2-3 sentences. And most of the prompt or rules is in this relatively big file called Claude MD, which is fully printed in the archive paper, which tells it what to do and what not to do. So it, for example, tells it only to edit in the topology section, never edit in the set theory section that Chad has already formalized. Don't throw away a work that you have already done. Try to always add more work. Some kind of very simple warnings about the language, because sometimes it can get stuck by, I don't know, assuming that you can do some commands and it actually cannot do those commands, and then it could take a while to recover. And I also eventually added some kind of dependency tracking and progress monitoring, because the development became big, and I felt like the LLM needs kind of some tools to better orient itself, like what depends on what, and which sections of the book are covered and which still need to be covered, etc. So, yeah, as I said, I have this kind of prompt injection, which is like this kind of poor man's interactive agent, basically, and it works. So just by doing like this very primitive automation, I basically made it work autonomously for a month, like without me doing any babysitting. Like the only reason why it stops at some point is that I ran out of the usage quotas by ChatGPT, so that is now happening like after 3 or 4 days of continuous running. OpenAI tells me that either I need to wait or I should pay them more money, so I typically wait. And sometimes the model, the coding agent, has some limitations, so it kind of runs out. So it has this magical thing called context compactification. So it's kind of keeping the history of the interaction, and because its context window is huge but still limited, at some point it needs to decide what to throw out of the context window. So that process seems to be some proprietary fancy technology which decides which part of the conversation very important and which can be forgotten. And usually it kind of works, but especially this ChatGPT, it sometimes declares itself to be like totally non-fixable, and I have to do what the podcast called lobotomy on the language model. So my solution is that I basically revert to an early, much earlier version of the conversation, which is much smaller, and I know that conversation was continued for, I don't know, maybe 5 more days. And I just tell that younger version, here is the work that your older version did, try to catch up with your older version and continue from where your older version stopped. So in the paper, I'm reporting these numbers, so 160 lines in total and 130,000 lines in these 2 weeks, and about 1,500 lemmas and theorems. What I saw today in this latest backup is about 250,000 lines, about 11 megabytes, and 2,217 stated theorems and lemmas, of which 2,124 are proved without recursive admits. So the dependency tracking script which I have is kind of recording extracting the information, like what was proved with an admit and what was proved without an admit, but with a dependency which is admitted. So that's the current numbers. This is, I guess, what I just said. So you want to, obviously, in the beginning, when it just sketched only the statements, everything is admitted, and the process of formalization is kind of moving the admitted theorems into the fully proved theorems. So people like Arne Ranta here, who are linguists and have been in this business for a while, have asked me how does it recover from mistakes. So you can look at the 5,000 commits if you want, but here is one email that I sent to Arne like some time ago. So for example, here there was a missing assumption that a family, that C, capital C, is a family of subsets of the topological space, of the carrier of the topological space. And this was how the initial auto-formalization did it. So the initial auto-formalization did quite a lot of simplifications, mistakes, stops, etc. But then it is instructed to prove the theorems. And during the proof checking, it suddenly sees that something isn't right. So then it quite often kind of goes back to the LaTeX file, and it looks at how it was initially auto-formalized, and it sees, oh, here is a missing condition. I should add an assumption to the statement of the theorem. So it's quite interesting in the sense that if you were doing some kind of one-shot auto-formalization of a single statement, it kind of is quite likely to do these mistakes. But if you are auto-formalizing a whole book, the whole book probably works as some kind of internal consistency checker. Like I think the language model doesn't want to cheat consciously, but it's making mistakes, and basically when it's instructed to finish the proofs, it will try to fix things if it can. So for example, here is the continuation of the email that I sent to Arne. So there is still, or at least when I was checking this like 10 days ago, the definition of local finiteness in LaTeX says that F is a family of subsets of X, but the formal definition that doesn't require that. So the current thing is kind of always adding this assumption to the various theorems where this is being used. But like what I told Arne, that like if the LLM sees like enough of this friction, then it's quite likely that the definition will eventually get fixed. That the LLM will decide, okay, I have been I have been doing this wrong, and I should probably modify this definition. This is some statistics that I tried to do yesterday. It may be imprecise. So the original LaTeX is about 176 proved major statements like theorems, lemmas, and corollaries. And then there is 115 examples and 207 exercises. And the exercises have no proof, so that's quite interesting. So in total, you have like 500 things that you can prove in this book. But unfortunately, 40% of that stuff that doesn't have a proof, like these are exercises. So initially when I saw what the LLM was doing, I saw that it's getting into proving the exercises quite a bit. But I kind of didn't want it, well, for a couple of reasons. Like, one reason is that this, like, it should formalize the major topological theorems. It shouldn't be formalizing some exercises nobody knows about. But also, like, doing the exercises is kind of a creative process, or I don't know, the LLM has seen all of the internet, and it has stolen all of the books out there. So the LLM probably has seen the solutions of a lot of these exercises somewhere on the internet. But still, like, it's not auto formalization to give a proof for an exercise which isn't written in the book. So I kind of modified the rules to tell it that it should prioritize, like, the theorems, the major theorems, and don't focus too much on the exercises and the examples. I also looked yesterday at, like, how many of these 176 major things can be kind of found semi-automatically in the formalization, and with some initial hacking, I found 110 to 120 of those. But, like, I can imagine that with more detective work, I could do more. Let me check the time. Yeah. So, as I said, like, later I have added, like, this dependency tracking, because with, like, 2000 lemmas, it looked like it's getting trouble detecting what remains to be proved to finish some major theorem. So I think, like, this very simple dependency tracking tool which I added helped it with that kind of stuff. And then, like, towards the end of the year, I saw that it really got seriously into proving some of these major theorems like Urysohn's lemma. So I did some kind of targeted prompting, but not like a major targeting. I basically just told it, try to finish the proof of Urysohn's lemma. And it kind of helped. So it kind of focused on the Urysohn lemma. So what I tell it in the rules file is not to be super focused on just one thing, but try to cover the whole thing, because if you only focus on one part, you might miss some dependencies between the sections, and then later you might have to refactor the stuff too much. So I wanted it to kind of have some initial coverage of everything, but then you also wanted to really prove some non-trivial stuff. So there is this tension, and in this case, like, just telling it, well, try to observe the rules, but then also try to prove some serious theorems, like, for example, Urysohn lemma, seem to have worked. For, I don't know if I have the teacher. Yeah. Let me say something about teacher. So teacher was this humongous 10,000 lines proof, which it finished on January 4. And the interesting thing is that there is a forward dependence in the proof. Like, the proof needs complete uniform convergence on complete metric spaces, which is in section 43. But the proof of theta is, I think, section 35 or something like that. And it really made the LLM quite uncertain. So it was in this kind of schizophrenic mode, trying to use the stuff that I told it, like you cannot use forward references. So it produced like 6,000 lines of just expanding the inductive proof into more and more terms, but not doing the induction. But then the interesting thing was that it kind of eventually saw that this is going nowhere, and it kind of refactored the book in a way. It kind of moved some parts from the section 43 before the section 35, which allowed it to finish the proof of teacher. So the proof of teacher is probably highly redundant, but anyway, it compiles now. So here I wanted to mention that some of these things we did recently also in Whole Light with John Harrison and Jun Lee, his colleague at Amazon. So John has been formalizing a lot of topology. So he had already the Urizon's lemma, but not the metrization. And we set it up very similarly, just with Whole Light and Claude code instead of the ChatGPT Pro codex. And it took a bit more than one day. I had some debugging to do there. But John basically confirmed that it's good. So we had the first success. And then it also did the Stone's theorem like this week, basically, which was another challenge from John. It kind of allowed me to compare like this tactical proof style used in Whole Light with the declarative proof style used in Megalodon. And initially, I wasn't even sure that it would prove the thing in Whole Light, because I was kind of running it in this compilation mode, but it's kind of very hard to read the proof scripts that you produce in Whole Light. It's just a chaining of tactics, and you don't see the current goals when you are writing the whole script. So I had to give it some debugging code so that it can see the current goal when it fails. So initially I was already quite pessimistic that Whole Light might not be a good system for doing this, at least not the way I was doing it. But then it started to get better and better. And now it seems like it can do things also quite reasonably in Whole Light. I'll probably skip this. I already mentioned it. I also mentioned teacher. Like I mentioned the sandboxing already. Compactification. So I also spoke about it. I have this headline that you can do it for $100. So I should say that there is. This is kind of true, but I've seen a bit of degradation. So it did quite a lot initially for this $100 for the 2 weeks. But in the month, it became a bit less, but it's still pretty impressive. This is the podcast, if you listen to it. So they are calling Megalodon the bouncer who is watching the LLM, not to hallucinate. So research questions. How much is it checker dependent versus the kind of loop that we have? I don't know. I'm kind of now thinking that it might not be super checker dependent. What seems to be relatively important is the error messaging and being able to see the goal and the basically proof state. Shrinking and refactoring. So it is doing quite some refactoring in the Megalodon experiment. I think it could be prompted to do even more refactoring, and maybe I could give it some more tools which will, do some anti-unification, for example, and try to pull out the general lemmas, but I haven't done that yet. Then there are hammers. So in Whole Light, you do have the Mason tactic and things like that. So you can say that it already has the hammer in Whole Light. In Megalodon, I tried to use a hammer, but it doesn't have the reconstruction, the proof reconstruction, so it kind of didn't work too much. Can the agent learn to reorder the textbook? It kind of struggles, but it seems to be capable of doing it occasionally, at least. Quality assurance. You ask John Harrison or Chad Brown whether it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I wanted to mention Zar Garzel, who kind of motivated me to do this. So Zar has now auto-formalized this big paper about Kevin Knuth and Skilling about foundations of inference. So he did it in Lean, and you can ask him about it. I think it's kind of a similar approach like the coding agent, which I'm using. And it's quite an interesting work. So he has a write-up about it. It, for example, found some work from 1950s, which is usable to fill in some gaps in the proofs there. So these are the co-workers and acknowledgements. And what else should I say here? For me, this is quite surprising. Like I kind of started to propose auto-formalization in 2013-14 because like these tools like Google Translate were getting quite good. But like what you can today do with these agents, which have like this body of general knowledge, like they can reason not just about the proofs, but also how to refactor the book, for example, is quite surprising to me. So it could really, as I said in the beginning, it could really be that in 2026 we will basically start formalizing by LLMs and forget that it was hard work for humans. Okay, that's it, and I can show you some demos if you want. So I should first, maybe I made it clear, I'm neither a Megalodon person nor a whole light person. I kind of superficially know these systems. But like what got me going in the beginning when I told it, could you auto-formalize the initial definitions, was that Chad Brown was standing next to me and it wrote the definition of topological space, and Chad was like, holy crap, like what is this? This is how I would have written the definition myself. So Chad was really like, he's like a not AI person, and he was quite surprised how it was written in the way that he would have written it. So then kind of Chad kind of kept confirming occasionally that it's doing things reasonably. The other feedback I got from John Harrison when it in the last and this week auto-formalized like this metrization and stone stuff, like John said that it looks good. So like John is the master of formalization, so I trust him. So on the other hand, like you have seen, for example, this email that I have sent to Arne Ranta, where I'm commenting on the wrong way how it initially auto-formalized something, and then it's kind of trying to recover from that. So I would say that this is some kind of interesting process which can probably be improved in various ways, both by better prompting and by giving in some better tools like various style checking tools, etc. And yeah, that's all I know at this point. Yeah. 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 Yeah, and actually, June Lee has already done it for whole life. That's like a very recent development. June and John have kind of seen the struggle that I was getting with doing it in this kind of brute force, stupid way, and they kind of did just what you are saying. I just haven't tried it yet. Yeah. Yeah, so actually, I had a postdoc for 2 years, Jonathan Huerta y Muniva, who was working on connecting language models to Isabel and doing reinforcement. So he is coming to visit us, I don't know, a month from now, and he was talking with Macarius about this kind of stuff. So I hope he will provide the expertise to do these things. Yeah. So it's really very interesting how the LLMs or the coding agents are coping or not coping with the gaps, like with these forward references in the proof of Tita. It's kind of a I like when I was thinking about auto formalization 10 years ago, I was thinking about it as a translation task, like English to French. But it's when you encounter a gap like this, you realize that this is much more than that, right? Like it's and it's really interesting what the LLMs can do and what they cannot do. Yeah, yeah. Thanks. We can hear you. Yeah. 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 Yeah, so again, like there is too much stuff to go through, but I can tell you some first impressions. So yes, like at some point. So for example, that it has occasionally really done strange things. So about last week when we were doing John's thing, it like the first 4 hours of formalizing this whole light thing was Claude Code adding the library lemmas to the current file with the proofs, basically copy pasting them and congratulating itself for doing substantial work. So I needed to change the prompt, the rules file, and tell it you really shouldn't duplicate what already exists. So that's one way how it can go off the rails, like doing some kind of easy copy pasting instead of focusing on the problem. But like in this Megalodon thing, what happened to me quite early was that I don't know where it's on, maybe somewhere on the internet. It had, let's say, like these hard theorems that it was supposed to be proving. And it started to introduce an axiom for each of them, which looked basically the same. And it was getting the theorem proved by having the axiom. So again, I needed to modify the rules book, telling it, well, don't add axioms. So it's doing like this weird stuff every now and then. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm afraid this is something that you would have to do yourself or ask somebody who has tried. I basically lost the capability to train these big models. I don't know, like some 5-6 years ago. So I'm only training small models. I like in this, like let's say you can say that there is a lot of whole 4 code out there on the internet. But for Megalodon, it's kind of hard to argue that there is a lot of Megalodon formalization on the internet. Yet, it kind of, with enough error messaging, it kind of finds its way through. So I would say there definitely is some amount of in-context learning going on in these very big language models, which allow it to kind of understand a new language which is not too dissimilar from the existing languages. I could imagine, and it's occasionally frustrating, that if I kind of had the capacity to train it myself and I would train it on Megalodon proofs, it would stop doing the most common mistakes that it's currently doing. What is slightly interesting, but that's probably all just proprietary technology, is that it seems like both, especially I would say in the whole light case, it seems to have struggled initially quite a lot, and then it became better and better. So I would assume that it's kind of getting this very long session, and it's doing a lot of in-context learning on the very big session. But yeah, like there are these compactification phases which are probably totally proprietary and nobody knows what's going on there. So my advice is, do the research. Like there is a lot of interesting research to be done there. So to be honest, I know very little so far how these coding agents are implemented. I just tried it and it seems to be doing something, and I I think people are working on open source coding agents. So we were already discussing it, I think, with the Naprosh guys like Atle, Adrian, and also with Zar and Jelle Piepenbroek, that we could really look at some, I think there is like Qwen Code, which is an open source coding agent running on top of Qwen or DeepSeek or whatever. And I guess there you could start doing the modification that you are proposing. Like I have no idea at this point how these things are developed. What I would now that I'm mentioning these open source coding agents, what seems to be interesting, and like Zar Gertzel and also John Harrison confirmed it, is that what it seems like a good idea to use, for example, DeepSeek, which is open source, and do some fine tuning, etc., etc. But there is really a performance jump between ChatGPT 5.1 and ChatGPT 5.2, and also between Claude Sonnet and Claude Opus. So it seems like a good idea to get into fine-tuning DeepSeek and doing open source coding agents focused on auto-formalization. But like this recent experience of several people is that the newer, heavier models are really quite a bit more powerful than the smaller, older models. And all of this is proprietary. So it could still be the case that there is some kind of phase transition that kind of just happened recently, where the kind of amount of general reasoning the new models are capable of doing is good enough to do some of these things, while for the older, smaller models, it wasn't so good. So yeah, that's kind of a caveat if you want to go into like this kind of open source hacking of the open source models. It might be frustrating, but yeah, I have no doubt that in a couple of months or at most a year we will have open source fine-tuned models for doing this, and it will cost us $1 instead of $100 to do it. Well, so my impression is that the model doesn't have too much trouble with it. So then it's kind of really posing the question: how much is this doing auto-formalization, and how much it is doing some theorem proving? But like the big caveat, which I already mentioned, is that this is a book which has existed for decades, and a lot of students have been taught topology from that. And I would expect that basically all the exercises have a solution somewhere out on the internet. So it's you would again need to do these experiments with some controlled open source model, or a model that you trained fully by yourself, and you know what is in the training data and what is not in the training data, so that you could have some claims about how good it is in basically solving new problems in these exercises from scratch. Currently, at least I didn't really focus on watching it too much. I kind of more focused on preventing it from trying to solve the exercises. But my impression was that it didn't have much trouble solving the exercises. Yeah, thanks for having me. Okay, guys, so good luck with auto-formalization. See you sometimes. Bye-bye.